So first of all, welcome to our monthly crime prevention meeting. And this is Crime Prevention Presents. It's an opportunity for us to be able to share as neighbors to learn more about crime prevention, safety, and how to make the City of Richmond government work for you. And we're fortunate tonight because we not only have one, we have two guests. So you're getting two for the price of one. We're obviously having a conversation on parking enforcement, but we're also inviting our code enforcement unit to come and give a brief overview of what they do so that they can answer your questions as well. We did this series because we felt it was really important for us to talk to residents about things that were of concern to you and learn a little bit more about how city government works and functions. And then if there is a breakdown or if there's a question about something, how you can get the answers to your questions. So I'm Michelle Milam. I'm crime prevention manager for the Richmond Police Department. I've been with the Richmond Police Department 17 years. I am also a resident of Richmond, and I'm happy to be here to help facilitate the conversation today. The way the agenda will go today is this. We're going to have an overview from Kevin Tisdale from our code enforcement unit. We're going to have an overview about parking enforcement from Lieutenant Deschus, and then we're going to open it up to the most important part, which is your questions. So they're going to keep their overviews very concise with a lot of information, but short so that we can be able to have question and answer. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin first to talk a little bit about code enforcement, and then we will go straight into the parking enforcement discussion and we'll go into question and answer.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Tisdale. I'm employee with the city, been with the city about 17 years, code enforcement for about the last 7. And code enforcement, what is code enforcement? So code enforcement handles generally private property issues of overgrown grass, cars on private property that are dismantled, if someone has a vacant property or, a bank has a foreclosed property, something like that, that's what we handle and to maintain the community's, overall aesthetic, broken windows, fences that are falling down, any kind of dilapidation. Those are the things we handle. A lot of the items we handle, we do it in conjunction with either police department or building department or planning. So we kind of touch and see a lot of different issues, both in the residential neighborhoods, in the commercial spaces, and kind of all that in between. So right now our staff is low. We have 3 code enforcement officers and a manager. And we're recruiting right now for additional staff, but yeah, so we're broken up throughout the city, and again we handle overgrown lawns, illegal dumping, unpermitted construction, again along with building enforcement. Also our what do you say our regulatory duties include commercial cannabis, tobacco, and alcohol. So we also deal with complaints in and around those issues and others. So, Michelle, if that's good enough, I'll end there, and then, of course, come back for any questions when we're ready.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you for being here. We appreciate you and the work that you're doing because I'm sure that there are a lot of questions that people may have. I'm going to now turn it over to Lieutenant Deschus, and he'll introduce a little bit of himself. But Lieutenant Deschus is the lieutenant that oversees our parking enforcement unit. And I know that there were quite a few questions that came up in the community about what is parking enforcement? What do you do? What are the key responsibilities of parking enforcement? Obviously, there's been a lot of questions about street sweeping recently and how that's going to be reinforced. One of the things I wanted to say before Lieutenant Deschus spoke is some of you have been around a while, you might remember the Baykeeper lawsuit where the city of Richmond actually unfortunately faced some litigation about not keeping our stormwater system clear and clean from the trash that was overflowing from our streets into the bay. And so that was one of the reasons for starting the street sweeping program. But that's only one function of the parking enforcement unit. There's a lot of other things that they are involved and engaged in, and the position really has evolved over time. So I wanted Lieutenant Decius to come and kind of give an overview of parking enforcement, some of the key responsibilities of what they do, and then some of the things that you might have questions about. We'll open up for question and answer. So I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Decius.
Thank you very much, Michelle. My name is Donovan Decius. I've been with the department for 20 years, been officer for almost 25. My current position, as Michelle said, is I'm a lieutenant, and I'm in charge of our traffic unit, which isn't an ideal position right now. We have one full-time traffic unit or traffic officer, excuse me, and then 3 others which are absorbed into patrol. And then we have 6 parking enforcement representatives or officers. And they have probably been with us for probably 4 years is our longest tenure. And a little bit more about me. I also work swing shift Monday through Thursday. I'm a lieutenant or a watch commander during the day. So I have a bunch of different kind of collaterals. So parking enforcement isn't just strictly parking. As Michelle said, it's kind of been a position which has evolved, which has taken on a lot of different tasks, roles, and responsibilities, and it's expanded their knowledge, skills, and abilities in a way to actually handle things on the street, much more than traditionally what parking is. Traditionally, parking enforcement's going to go out. They're going to, in certain cities and ours, if there's permitted areas, they're going to give citations there. Or if there are, 2-hour parking rules, they'll go out and they'll give citations and chalk wheels, and maybe impound when needed. But they've become pretty vital in our battle or our struggles with encampments. So as we all know, the encampments throughout the city kind of pop up, we address them, and then they will move on to other places. The 6 officers who work in parking enforcement are vital, and they're kind of our first line of defense. They go out when individuals in the community call our non-emergency number or send emails to individuals here, officers or professional staff. Parking enforcement are the ones that's going to get the brunt of that work, going out and red tagging. Red tagging is a form of basically notification to the people that own or staying in certain vehicles or RVs that they have to move the vehicle within 72 hours, and it has to move basically at least a mile. If it's not moved, then it can get impounded and towed. People think and believe that right at 72 hours, we're going to be there because of our staffing. I mean, we haven't had 6 parking enforcement officers like we do now in years. So our staffing is actually pretty good. However, with the amount of work we have, it is difficult for us to get to those 72-hour vehicles in a timely manner. So it's usually about a week. So they're the first line of defense in terms of the actual encampments. And then when those encampments are cleared out and there's extra debris, they're the ones that coordinate with abatement and Hugo with our public works division in terms of getting the streets cleaned up with the sofas, the chairs, whatever kind of garbage is out there on the roadway to try to make it as pretty as possible. They also respond with an abandoned vehicle hotline that people call on a daily basis. They respond, listen to those messages, take down the license plates, the location where they are. And it's about a 2 to 3 week turnaround, unfortunately, just given the amount of work we have. But they will then go out, try to find those cars. If there's a legal authority to impound or tow them, they'll tow them. If there's something where we can just red tag or cite them, they're going to give red tags and cites. So they are responsible for that aspect as well. In terms of their geographical locations and their responsibilities, 6 of them they each have their own area that they're responsible throughout the city. And it kind of mirrors the patrol officers' beats. So it allows our patrol officers and specific parking enforcement reps to have a really good relationship and work together and not have to bounce around to different parking enforcement reps. They can have an open line of communication to try to get things resolved in a timely manner. They're also responsible, like I said, for parking enforcement. When people park, and we'll talk a little bit about daylighting and what that is in terms of parking, but when there's parking complaints, if officers are unable to address it, they'll go out and issue citations and impound when appropriate. They work the 23rd Street corridor for the 2-hour parking, chalking tires, issuing citations. That was kind of a monster in of itself when we first started because people were not used to it, but it has significantly increased the availability of parking on 23rd Street and making it safer for individuals to cross the street, because there are less cars that are blocking officers' views when they're turning off and onto 23rd Street. Currently, they've been passing out these warning or courtesy citations. We are aware that the first batch, this code did not work. It currently works now, and when you pull it up, you will see, I pulled it up on my iPad a couple minutes ago, you will see the routes where parking or where street sweeping is going to start, the days, the hours, and it has a map. So if anyone's gotten these, rest assured, these are not citations. These are strictly just a courtesy notice, which says, hey, on April 15th, yes, on tax day, we are going to start street sweeping and we're going to start enforcement. That is with the hopes and the beliefs that Public Works is going to have all of the new street sweeping signs erected and put up in all the areas. We can get into street sweeping a little bit, but as a whole, that's kind of what our parking enforcement reps do. They also help us with Cinco de Mayo, Juneteenth, the 4th of July fireworks on the 3rd of July with traffic control. They assist the traffic unit for us on motorcycles, on parades, the Little League parade and things of that nature. So they're kind of a jack of all trades and are the unsung heroes, I think, in the department, just because they do work their tails off. And they do get recognition, but I think that they need to get more. So Michelle, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
So a couple of things. I just want to do a brief recap. Kevin gave us a good overview of what code enforcement is and how it's different from parking enforcement. So code enforcement deals with maintaining community standards on private property primarily. And so that includes things like inspections of private property to ensure that they're in compliance with city codes. It includes like education and outreach efforts, handling complaints with property maintenance, zoning issues, public nuisances, overgrown lawns, illegal dumping, unpermitted constructions, and issuing notices of violation and follow-up. It's important that that is a process and a procedure, for people to understand, and that it is a legal process where there has to be notification because it's not the city's land. We actually have to be able to go through a process to make sure that those standards are maintained. Parking enforcement deals with many of the things that Lieutenant Deschus just talked about. Parking issues, cars that are violation of some of our local PC codes that are parked. We see a lot of times cars that are parked blocking driveways or sidewalks, or cars that are just abandoned or broken down or that are out of compliance. They do work and help assist with, encampment issues where if a vehicle encampment is formed, we have to go through a procedure to be able to abate it. And parking enforcement usually is one of the first units to come in contact with that. And they coordinate with a variety of different issues, including street sweeping and other issues throughout the department. So just wanted to give you guys a brief recap of some of the roles and responsibilities. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to what we really wanted to do was to get to your questions. So the first question is, what is Richmond's rollout plan for removing parked cars next to crosswalks? And I think I know why that question was asked. I think it's because there was a new law that went into effect this year, right?
Yeah, so daylighting is a new parking law which came into effect. You cannot park 20 feet within an intersection or a crosswalk. So we've had some questions where people are asking, are we going to paint every area red? We are not. The law does not require that, and that'd be a whole lot of red paint. So we have been, I believe Lieutenant Patchen has done or is doing some social media campaigns highlighting what daylighting is. And we are with these as well. We have a couple different ones. We were able to actually mark certain kind of violations which people are doing, and one of them was daylighting. So just understand, if you park within 20 feet of a crosswalk or intersection, you can get a ticket, which is going to be a $50 citation. The purpose for this law is when people come to an intersection, so say I'm at, we'll say 23rd and Visalia. When I get to that intersection, if there's cars parked directly next to me and I have to pull out and keep looking and looking and looking, the nose of my car is going to get into the traffic or the lanes of traffic, and potentially there's going to cause an accident. What they're trying to do is limit or not limit your field of view and what you can see looking left and right. So they're trying to make it safer for the individuals that are driving, pulling on the road, as well as the pedestrians that are crossing in the crosswalk. A lot of times pedestrians, or in my experience, when they walk out, they're shielded or covered by some of these parked cars, and then we have some pretty bad accidents. So in terms of rolling it out, we're doing a social media campaign, issuing these warnings, but probably about the same time as we do the street sweeping enforcement, that's when we're going to start enforcing the daylighting. And it's going to be a shock to people. I will not try to, make it any less than what it is. People are going to be shocked because they're going to get cited for it. So we're going to try to do as much as we can to educate, but there has to be a time when enforcement actually takes place. So, and if someone believes that they did something or didn't do something wrong, there's a way to appeal those citations. On the back of the citation, there's going to be websites. We don't call anyone anymore. It's all via the web. You can upload pictures, your reasoning for why you think you were wrongly given a citation, and then an appeals officer from one of our third party company is going to look at stuff. And if they have questions, they can contact me or Sergeant Melgoza regarding it. So that's kind of what our plan is right now.
Thank you, LT. And, the follow-up question to that about the public education that you talked about is there any way that a copy of these courtesy notices can be made public so that the public can have an opportunity to look at them or share them with their neighbors?
Let me see what I can do. Let me make a note and I'll speak to Lieutenant Patchen and see if we can get that posted somewhere or sent out to people in the community.
Thank you. I have another question that came from the Q&A, and it says, can an HOA manage streets that have HOA landscapers who clean the streets twice a month be exempted from street sweeping? We currently have a sign on the first Tuesday for street sweeping day. So I know this is an issue that has come up with some of the HOAs saying, hey, we already have maintained our property. Are we exempted from this? And, I know that's something that's come up to city council. Is that something that you have jurisdiction over or?
It's a public roadway, correct? If it's a public roadway, then that's going to be subject to our enforcement. There might be some sort of documentation and bylaws with the HOAs. I don't want to speak too much because to be honest, I'm not 100%, but if it's a public roadway, I'm pretty confident that it's going to be something that the police department is going to enforce if people do not move their cars when they do the street sweeping. I believe,
Yeah.
I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, I know that's come up quite a bit, and there's been concern from different groups on either side about the concern with that issue. And just for the record, we enforce based upon the directive that comes from city staff. We report to the city manager as the police department or all city employees, and those directions come from the city council. So I do think that that's probably the appropriate place to ask that question, but we definitely will take that into consideration and try to get an update or an answer for you because it's a great question. The next question was, please focus on Garvin and 24th. It's impossible to see coming from the 24th to Grant School. Same at the long red zone at night. Impossible to see traffic on Garvin coming from south in 24th. So Garvin and 24th seems to be a hot spot area. I didn't know if you wanted to respond to that, LT, but that was somebody who just had a concern.
Yeah, I'll put it on our list of areas for additional enforcement and just extra patrols. Thank you.
All right, moving right along. I've tried for many months to get a van removed from the street. It never moves. It takes up a parking space on the street. Why does this ticket keep on being closed out without ticketing the vehicle. Now, this came from someone anonymous, so I don't know who gave it or if they can give more information. Um, if the vehicle is on the public right of way and it's deemed as abandoned or it's not moving, vehicles have to move every 72 hours. Isn't that correct, LT?
It is. And if we red tag it, then it needs to move, approximately a mile. I mean, it's a very touchy subject in terms of, figuring out if something's truly moved a mile or not. But if a car parks on a city street, it moves and then comes back, like those 72 hours start all over again. And people, like, we just have to understand that it is a public roadway, it is a public street. And unless you have a petition with Public Works, engineering, and things of that nature to have specific parking, whether it be disabled parking or something in front of your house, parking on the roadway is, first come, first serve type stuff. So if it's moved and it's come back, then we're not going to impound it or tow it. And then we also have to think about if people are living in their cars, there's certain processes for that with the camping ordinance. So it's not always as cut and dry as someone might think.
And maybe I could speak a little bit to the camping ordinance because that might be a reason. I'm not sure for this ticket if the maker of that question wants to reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to get more information and kind of look up that particular van. If someone is living in a van that's on a public street, the camping ordinance says that you cannot abate an encampment without first offering services. And offering services means you have to, one, per the ordinance, offer an emergency shelter bed. And two, that shelter bed has to be available. That individual has to either accept or decline services. The only exception is if there are no emergency shelter beds that are available. And although we have, I think it's close to 1,800, don't quote me on it. I want to make sure I give you the right figures, emergency shelter beds or shelter beds available, shelter beds available in the county. We have about 1,400 people who are unhoused in the city of Richmond, and a lot of them live in their vehicles. So if someone is living in their vehicle, we will send out the core team to go and make contact with them and see if they are interested in an emergency shelter bed. Sometimes they accept it, sometimes they decline it. A lot of reasons why people might decline is they have dogs and the shelter that's offered doesn't accept dogs, or they're a couple and the shelter that they're going to doesn't accept couples, or for a variety of reasons. But as long as they're moving that vehicle every 72 hours and they're not doing things like urinating in public or things like that, there are violations of other parts of the municipal code. It's not necessarily illegal, but they do have to move it. It does take time, though, for that to happen. It shouldn't take months. But, in a perfect scenario, it takes at least a week to be able to handle that kind of a vehicle. So if you have questions about that, I'll drop it in the chat and, I'll be happy to work with you on the vehicle and see what we can do to try to start the process. Once outreach has been made, our part is done, and it really is up to parking enforcement to go and to red tag the vehicle. You have to legally give them a 72-hour notice. And that has to be done. And then once that's done, then the vehicle can be either towed or they might move it before that 72-hour notice is done. And they can move it a mile and come back, like Lieutenant Disha says. So it's not a perfect solution if you have cars on your block, but it's important for the public to understand some of these processes. So when you see a vehicle that's been parked there for a while, what the process is. So going to the next question that came up is, I have a neighbor whom I like, who has kept their camper parked on the street since the start of the pandemic. So it's parked on the public street. Of course, this impacts street parking, except when the camper is used for travel. What is Richmond's policy about parked campers using street parking? And I do not wish to report my neighbor if it is not okay. So.
The campers are going to be the same as a vehicle. It's a 72 hours. It's a little different than, we'll say, a boat, which is not attached to a trailer or to a vehicle or such. You can't park those at all. And we can impound those. Same thing with like 18-wheeler trailers. Those can't be left unattended as well. And there's some RMC codes that we can address with that. But in terms of the RVs, it's the 72 hours as well for parking. It can be cumbersome for the communities because I know that they are big and it does take up a lot of parking. If you have a good relationship with your neighbors, I've always recommended knocking on a door and having a conversation first and see how those things can be resolved. But if it becomes an issue where people aren't allowed to actually park, you can call us and we can red tag it.
Great. And then there's another question that's here. Do you tag commercial vehicles parked overnight in a HOA residential community? It's a public road. Now, here's a very interesting question, and I'd like maybe for a response from Lieutenant Deschus on public property, and then also a response from Kevin about what happens if it's on private property, because I think people do need to understand the difference. So,
Yeah, so for us, it's the same thing. If it's a commercial vehicle, uh, if it's well, it's going to depend on like there's certain kinds of commercial vehicles, right? There's pickup trucks, which could have commercial license plates and things of that nature. I mean, if someone calls and says it's been sitting there for a while, we're going to red tag it as we normally would. We can tow, like I said, an 18-wheeler trailer, which is our RMC. Right then, it's going to take about an hour or two to get it out of there. But we're going to do the same process as we would if it's a public roadway. We don't really contact or touch much that's on the public roadway unless some sort of crime occurs, like DUIs and things of that nature. So I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Some of the same questions and issues, determining what is a commercial vehicle, looking at, the weight, if it has any signage, what zone the property is in. Is it in a residential zone, a mixed use zone? So again, that question, it can have some variation, but typically if, commercial vehicle is parked on the property and there's not a business license that's tied to have one vehicle with that business at that, approved by planning, all these other caveats, then that's something we can notice, with a 10-day notice of violation and put them on notice that they cannot park their vehicle on the private property, and kind of proceed from there using our administrative process.
thank you both. Thank you both. There was another question that was about, well, this was just to say, we'll take note of it. The van is parked on 29th and Barrett, and they're not camping in it. Thank you for that. We'll make sure that we follow up on that. And then there's another question I think could also be good for both of you and for code enforcement as well. Hello, Michelle. Can you tell the people on this call what triggers a nuisance house and how that tool can be helpful for neighbors with problem houses in their neighborhood? Could you also please mention how important calling in issues are, whether the problem has happened in real time or not? Without the call volume, we wouldn't be able to substantiate to the city council the need for more officers when the time is appropriate. Thank you. So this question really is, you got a house in your neighborhood, it's a nuisance house. Maybe there's drug dealing going on, maybe there's squatters. And a lot of times people call immediately. They call the police department and say, hey, can you do something? And there's some things that we're limited in doing on private property. So maybe Kevin, you can speak first to this, and then Lieutenant Deschus.
Sure, thank you. Many examples come up of this with this situation, and and again, it's a city effort with multiple departments. I'll say first of all, but without those complaints, without the notifications, from the people, it is hard to one justify and kind of down the line. So, an example of you have a vacant house, maybe there's some drug dealing, maybe there's some different issues with vehicles and issues going on, and one call, okay, may get somebody out there, but repeated calls, appropriate repeated calls, what that does is say, hey, this is more of an ongoing problem, and there's a difference in the problem, hey, somebody didn't cut their grass once versus, hey, this is going from a vacant house to people hanging out to, okay, maybe they're setting fires, maybe in the escalation of events. So in code enforcement, we see that and can take additional actions and use our legal remedies to address, true nuisance properties at a different level. So again, a nuisance is defined as any violation of the RMCC and the RMC in 9.22. But being declared a public nuisance is an important designation, and having those calls for service both at the police department and in code both help us justify, using our administrative processes when we write the citations and get the warrant. We can use, hey, we've had 30 plus calls regarding a myriad of complaints about a particular house or an area which is affecting the health and safety and all those kind of key factors in a neighborhood. So yes, it's very important.
So it's important that you brought that up, Kevin, because oftentimes people don't know what a nuisance is and what a public nuisance is. And so a public nuisance triggers a higher threshold. And, in some cases, in the past, I know we've gotten maybe the city attorney's office involved because there's been repeated calls for service from that property. The neighbors have, been able to demonstrate the concern. There's health and safety risk. Is that something that you all document working alongside with the PD?
Yeah, yes, document alongside with the PD, and again, it may be alongside the fire department, wastewater, engineering, building, planning, to really make wherever they lie, where the violation lies, whether it's the health and safety code, the building code, um, just to bring that together and formulate not only a plan but a case to bring that to the city attorney for processing. So none of these processes are fast. It can take anywhere between a few weeks to a few months, but in the end, and working on a few right now, the end result is it goes from kind of the worst house on the block to the best house. So but again, it takes time and it's frustrating. But in the end, the system does work. It just need to keep pressing and keep pushing that way.
Yeah, Lieutenant Decius, I just would like to hear. So, when you hear residents call in and say, "Hey, this property is a nuisance," what would you like them to know about the process, and what's most helpful to you, as a law enforcement officer, to be able to help the public work together with law enforcement?
For me, the most important thing, and for us here at the department, is just information, right? Information for us is key. It's the most valuable thing. So if someone's having an issue with a house, I mean, Kevin's aware of one we have on the south side that I won't give an address, but it's been a problem for years. And it's gotten better over time, but it kind of goes, there's ebbs and flows. If people do not call, we don't always know about it, right? There are a lot of streets in the city that we need to patrol. We can't be everywhere at one time. We can be at one intersection, go around the block, and something could have happened at the intersection we were just at. So for us, information is key. When I get, at least on the south side, which is kind of what I'm responsible for, when I get calls or repeated calls, whether it be called in, phone calls, uh, emails, community forums like this, where there are nuisance areas or areas which need to be addressed, we do make it a priority to get officers out there and start contacting people. A lot of times how we can impact it is, number one, just being out there and being visible. That deters a lot of it. If there's vehicles that are out there which can be towed, that's a way to actually get compliance with people, because people do not like, number one, getting tickets or getting their cars towed. I sure as heck wouldn't want that either. But when it becomes such a problem where, there's so much garbage in the front of the house, the house is halfway falling apart, there's sewage running, that's when we don't really have, oversight or authority over some of those things. So that's when we start working with code enforcement, public works, city attorneys, as we have, and like executor stuff going on. I mean, things that I'm not very good at, but what ends up happening is like civil search warrants, when their inspections are done on the house, and then certain notices. So when Kevin says that it takes time, it definitely does take time. And it's not an easy thing to do, to potentially fix someone's house or however it is. But I just go back to information is key, like knowledge to us and knowing what's going on, and people not being afraid or thinking that they're bothering us when they call dispatch or they send an email. That's what we're here for. Been doing it for a long time, still enjoy it, still want to help people out. But on that side, people also need to understand that because they're calling about this one issue, it doesn't mean that other people aren't calling about 15 or 20 other ones as well. So just grace and patience is always very much appreciated.
So call,
Yeah.
call sounds like the thing. And then, working between PD and code enforcement on these issues. That's a really important point. And thank you for speaking to that. Both of you did a great job of describing. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one more point when we're mentioning calls and complaints, and I should have mentioned this in my intro. The city probably in the next month or so is going to be going to a new complaint or really a land track complaint process. It's going to look new. It's going to feel new. So citizens should be aware within it. Like I said, within the next month or so, e-track it or the current complaint system is going to be replaced and it's going to a new system. So more information should be on the website pretty soon, but just kind of forewarn you on that to where things should be easier, outreach should be easier, people should be a little bit easier to contact and easier to search your complaints and look up different areas and things. So more to come on that probably in the next month or so. But just wanted to give a heads up.
Yeah, thank you for the plug, Kevin. I think we're trying to upgrade some of our online reporting systems that hopefully will be beneficial to everybody on here so that, most people are used to, sending something in via the app, so they'll be able to do that more efficiently. Couple of other things, Lieutenant, looks like 24th Street at night, many cars speeding, loud damaged exhaust pipes, failure to stop, basically is keeping nightly drug traffickers out of the north and east neighborhoods is a high priority. So just wanted to let you know about it. That's a concern that's coming up in the Q&A is 24th Street at night.
Yeah, that's an area that we're very familiar with, unfortunately. We do have officers that go out there specifically for that, probably once or so a month, and for a myriad of different reasons or quality of life issues. So it is something we are aware of. I know at the intro at the beginning, I talked about our traffic unit. We're hoping with some officers getting off training in the near future to bolster our traffic unit back up to a full-time unit. So that will definitely help those types of issues with additional enforcement. So it's not falling upon deaf ears. It's just that sometimes the staffing and calls for service, like right now, we've got like 17 calls holding and, officers on 9 calls right now, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it pulls us away from doing proactive things, which the officers really enjoy doing. So, but it doesn't mean don't call. Please call.
No, it doesn't mean don't call. But thank you for, sharing that issue about the staffing. If you 17 calls and, you have a certain percentage that are holding, that definitely could impact service. But I know we try to get out there as quickly as we can. Another thing that came up is, can RPD have a public link listing or showing obviously stolen bikes? These seem to pile up at encampments. I just saw a stack under the McDonald BART underpass, and on Wall Street, all the campers are back there and squatting. How we deal with bikes at encampments. So, as I mentioned before, when an encampment abatement gets ready to occur, we're going to post notice. We're going to post a 3-day notice that the campers have to leave after services have been offered. But what do we do about the debris that's left behind in the bikes? That's usually a public works things, but LT, you can respond to that. And, Kevin, if you want to respond on private property, what do you do?
Go ahead, Kev.
Okay. So, on private property, we can enter private property by consent or by warrant. So, when it gets to the point to where, on certain properties, it happens both on vacant lots and properties with houses, we request from a judge, hey, these are the items we want to move and remove. This is what we want to clean up. This is what we want to fix. The judge affords us the warrant to be able to do that and enter onto private property. So similar to Michelle, we do a 24-hour notice for our warrant postings, letting the property owner and whatever occupants know that, at this day of time, we're going to be entering onto to clean and or remove. And some of the items, if they're valuable, they have to store, and the rest, if it's deemed not valuable, it gets disposed of, and all those fees and charges get levied or leaned onto that particular private property. So that's our private property abatement process.
process. And yeah, and on public right of way, I think in terms of posting a link to obviously stolen bikes, that's something that we could talk about. Typically property holds, property that's unclaimed for a specific period of time that legally we have to hold it. I think it's 90 days, to be able to hold it before someone, either claims it or we have to dispose of it. But that's not a bad idea. So I will take that back internally and see if we can kind of talk about what we could do in that situation. But in the case of people's property that belongs to folks who are unhoused, even if they're on, public right of way and, they are camping, and in violation of the camping ordinance, we still have to legally store items that might be theirs in some cases, unless we're posting the notice. And that's the reason why we have the 72-hour notice to say, hey, you have to claim all your property by such and such a time. And if they haven't gotten all those bikes out of there, then those bikes would have to be taken in and either disposed of, or something has to be done. Now, if it's obviously stolen, the question is, can we identify that this was a bike that belongs to somebody? So I think part of what's helpful is obviously if someone had a bike stolen, is to make sure that they're reporting it, and that if you have some kind of way to etch something into your bike to show that it's your property, that's always helpful too. So we have a way to be able to identify it. And that way we can kind of identify whether it's a stolen bike or not. Otherwise, it may get disposed of, once we finish, kind of the processes that we have to go through. We do see a lot of bikes, especially at encampments. I've seen people who have a collection of bikes who try to take those before the 72-hour notice period has ended. And then once the 72-hour notice period has ended, we have to move forward. So we have to do our noticing process first. And there's a different process for obviously private and public property.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. And I know, go ahead.
In terms of having a database or something for public record in terms of bikes, that might be a little tough. I don't know if we could. Obviously, for us to do that, there's got to be, like descriptions or pictures of the bikes and then serial numbers. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the serial numbers of my bikes. Unfortunately, I'm sure I probably have some paperwork somewhere. So having that might be difficult. And a lot of times bikes aren't reported stolen, so we can't really prove it. It's easier with cars because of the value. Well, some bikes are probably as much as certain cars in terms of value, but just having the information and being able to probably combine it and then trying to disseminate it, it might be a possibility, but I'm not sure if that's something that we've really thought about or something that we're gonna do, but I'll always bring it up and have some conversations about it.
Yeah. Couple of other quick questions, and before we're getting close to time, but we have a few more questions left. Addendum to 24th, just a reminder that there's DUI driving that's frequently happening, and they're hoping for more DUI enforcement on 24th Street, which is something that I've heard before from the neighbors. So I just want to say that's duly noted. And I know we have Lieutenant Deschus here to be able to take that down. Another thing is, I'm wondering what type of code enforcement can help keep the area next to the Wells Fargo lot on McDonald Avenue cleaner from trash. The Republic trash containers were being ripped up and now they're being put away instead of the fruit vendors, and perhaps the dumpsters are leaving piles of trash that do not get picked up. I reported it on the app, but I haven't gotten any resolution. So Kevin, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that Wells Fargo lot.
Yeah, so it don't have property specific by itself, but given that that is a commercial lot, they're supposed to have a maintenance plan or a property, what is it called, upkeep plan, on file with the planning department. So that's something I'll look into and kind of see where it is. I know that's not my area, but I, obviously have heard complaints there. But yeah, I can look that up. But yeah, that's something that we can notice, and at a different level with the planning department, because obviously, commercial property, they have a lot bigger area, a lot more stakes, so they're mandated to keep things clean, have garbage pick up every, let's say, twice a week or once a month or something like that. But it depends on the plan and the lot and square footage and that. But yeah, that's something I can definitely look into and speak to that code enforcement officer about.
That'd be great. And Kevin, how can you tell if something's private or public? I know that that's a lot of times people say the city's not taking care of this. The city's not doing anything about this. There's a homeless encampment on this property and it turns out to be private property. How can you tell?
Sometimes you can't. It's hard. I have, again, been in the city 18 years. There's mapping services. There's, things we can look at. But basically, how I determine it, well, if it's two things. If it's zoned by the planning department, it's within the geographical boundaries of the city of Richmond. But private and public property, yeah, that's it. It's hard to tell sometimes. Some fences don't show true boundaries. Some roads, which were once public property, have been given to private property, so and are still open for public access. So really, it's in some areas harder than you would think. But again, we have maps. We review the resolutions to determine before we start an enforcement case. Where does said violation lie? Whose property? Who's responsible? So that we can get them mailed and sent to the appropriate party.
Yeah, and we hear that a lot, where people are concerned about things and it might be on private property. And so that's something just to keep in mind. A lot of people don't know that there's delineations and then there's jurisdictions too, because sometimes it's on Caltrans property or it's on Union Pacific right away or BNSF or BART or something. And then we have to coordinate with those agencies to clean it up. And just because it's inside the city of Richmond limits doesn't mean that it's under our jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction is the public right of way, is it not?
Correct. And for, looking at Caltrans, a perfect example, kind of off of Central Avenue. Code enforcement get a lot of complaints. Hugo, his abatement team gets a lot of complaints. But Caltrans, they have a kind of cycle where they go out either once a month, twice a month to hit it. But yeah, so that's an example of we take the complaints forward to them because it's really out of our jurisdiction.
Yeah, we work with Caltrans too on unhoused encampments that are on their right of way, as well as Union Pacific. We just worked on a couple of those today. And so we have to work with them and they have a process. They usually, for Caltrans, submit a list to us every week of the encampments that they plan to abate, but they still go through a process of trying to offer services first. To notify. So that's an important thing for if you're on the line and you have neighborhoods, groups, you're on online groups and somebody is concerned about something, is it public or is it private? That's an important question to ask because there's a different process for following up with stuff on public right of way versus private. So thank you for explaining that. I think that that's really, really helpful. Oh, go ahead. A couple few last questions that I had is if something happened an hour ago, can I still call it in? LT?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, please do. Please call things in as they happen. One thing I'm going to remind people, please don't report it on Nextdoor. If you have not reported it to the police department, we cannot see, number one, what's happening in your Nextdoor community. People send me screenshots. Those might be 5, 6 hours behind. I might be somewhere, driving and, so it's important if you want an officer to be there to call 911 or non-emergency dispatch if you need a police call for service. I see a lot on social media. Social media is great for a lot of things. It is not great for reporting crime. Am I not correct, LT?
Very much so. And just a little bit of an additional information. So we used to have online reporting. It's currently down. There's some stuff it's currently down. We're trying to find a better way to, or an additional way or another way to actually do online reporting. I won't get into specifics, but it's currently down for the foreseeable future. So even if it's something that you would have normally reported online, give us a call and we'll still take the reports for you guys.
Yeah, and I know that that's been a big change for a lot of people. You're used to if you got your vehicle broken in and you just want, you just want the report for your insurance company. Please, for now, spread the word, spread the word, spread the word. Call in until we are able to update our online system so that you can do online reports again. Very, very good information. Finally, final question is thanks. Is there an email mentioned or a phone number to be able to report things? So if somebody needs to report something to code enforcement, Kevin, how would they do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on the city website, um, there's our emails, our areas, and I think the complaint hotline is 510, and I can put this in the chat, 621-1279, 621-1279. So there you get to kind of hear again kind of what we do in the intro voicemail, and then for this particular unit, this department, press one, and you get us and forwarded to kind of whatever area and/or whatever type of complaint. So that's one of the best ways to reach us, or again, by the city app, eTracker right now reaches us as well.
All right, same thing, Lieutenant. Just want to check in with you. So somebody sees a car that's abandoned. How do they report it?
510-620-6644, or you can call, and I responded, I think, with the number, the 233-1214, which is our non-emergency number. The first number I give, and I'll even type it in the chat, is the 620-6644 is specifically for abandoned vehicles. But for other issues, parking complaints, trash if need be, or anything else, do the non-emergency number, which is a 233-1214. And let me try to get here.
Yeah, I think I can put it in there for you. And it's important that everybody have that number programmed, that non-emergency number programmed into their phone, is it not?
No, it is. I mean, it makes it just so, I mean, you're not searching for it, obviously, and it just makes it's easily accessible. But I'm going to emphasize, if there's a serious emergency, just call 911. And if you don't know, if you think it might be, just use 911. But for parking things, traffic, abandoned cars, use the either non-emergency or the abandoned vehicle hotline. Those are your two best bets.
Absolutely. So we're coming to the end. And first of all, I want to thank both of you for being online. And I got one last thing where it says, thank you for this valuable information in the Zoom. The reason I was so pleased that you both wanted to be on and, share this information is because a lot of people don't know this stuff, guys. I see a lot of frustration in neighborhoods and online and in groups. And how do I do this? And it's just important that we all have information about how these processes work. Even if you don't like it, even if you disagree with it, even if you think we could do a better job, it's important for you as residents to be able to know how your government and your city works, because the city works for you. And we can't work without you. We have to work in partnership with you because we are all the city. The city isn't just the government. The city is the people. And so we thought it was just really important to have some things where we shared this information with you. If you learned something today, raise your hand. I'm going to take a look at the attendee list. If you did learn something today, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, I see some hands raised. So so that's good. So if you learned something today and you raised your hand, the one thing I'm going to ask you to do is this is going to be recorded, and it's also going to be shared on KCRT so that you can share it with your neighborhood groups. Please, once I send out the link, and I'll send out the link through the various channels, and it will be on our social media too. It'll be on Nextdoor, it'll be on Facebook, and I'll send it back out through the email list. Share it with someone else who needs to know this. So the next time somebody comes and says, hey, there's a nuisance property, or there's an abandoned car over on my block, or, there's something going on with, this lot that's owned by this owner, or, I don't understand all these parking enforcement rules, or what's happening with street sweeping. You can refer them back to this video and maybe get some of those questions answered, or maybe you can share some of that information yourself. So before I close it out, I want to give some last words, because I know you guys have busy nights and some of you guys got to go to other meetings, to Lieutenant Decius and Kevin, and then we'll close out.
I don't really have much to add. Just thank you very much. Just understand and please relay to everyone, and I'll give another RNCC presentation, I think, on April 14th. April 15th is when street sweeping starts. So the the warnings will be over. I understand that there are a lot of people in the community that are some people that aren't happy with it. But they've inputted and they've put a bunch of signs throughout the entire city. So it's, I guess, more equitable, a little bit more fair in terms of everyone is potentially going to be at the mercy of the enforcement. But understand that it's coming, and then just the 20-foot rule for the daylighting. Just be aware of that. We're going to try to have some grace with that as well, but we have to do our jobs, and ultimately it's for the safety of the people that are driving and the pedestrians. Other than that, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I only have today and tomorrow, and I'm on vacation for a little bit, so I'm looking forward to it. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, LT. April 15th, tax day. That's when street sweeping is being enforced. And so just make sure you share the word April the 15th, and we'll try to see if we can get a copy of those notices and warnings that are rolled out to people so that you have a copy of it. Kevin, any last words?
Just, as code enforcement, we're happy to help, happy to hear people, even if if you get us and your issue is not within our, unit, department, division, we're happy to guide you and kind of give you the information you need as a citizenry. So again, we're here for you. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you both so much. And thank you for everybody who joined. And thank you for being the best part of Richmond. Have a good night.